They aren't doing that. Lots of people aren't doing that. And we need to figure out why. And I'm not cherry picking anecdotes or statistics here. Every possible indicator is sending the same signal. Here's another one. Real estate agents are quitting in droves right now. It's another thing you might not have heard about. This is data from the National Association of Realtors. It shows the number of members in the Realtors Association, the light blue, and the number of existing homes for sale, which is the darker line. From 2012 to 2022, membership in the association grew every year, and now it's steadily declining. The Association of Realtors now has just 1.4 million members compared to 1.6 in October 2022. And as the chart shows, for most of this century, there have been far more homes for sale than realtors. And that's the kind of ratio you want. That's a healthy ratio. But that hasn't been the case for several years now. Realtors are competing over a very small number of homes. And on top of that, a recent legal settlement means that realtors have to disclose their fee up front, which is leading many home buyers to handle the process themselves, which also isn't helping things for the industry. So to give you an idea of how quickly the housing market has become unaffordable, take a look at this chart from the Wall Street Journal just the other day. They're getting their data from the Intercontinental Exchange, Angie, and the Labor Department. If you're buying a home now as opposed to 2019, then on average, you're paying 22% more in principal. This is just from 2019. Again, 35% more in interest, 31% more in property tax, 72% more in insurance, 85% more in home maintenance, and 175% more in emergency repairs. So your total annual bill is 40% higher than it would have been just 6 years ago. It's like catastrophic. If you're the average American, your annual expenditure on housing went from $20,600 to $28,500. It's almost $30,000. And it's worth taking a brief detour, though. We also mentioned property taxes. It's worth taking a brief detour to focus in on the property tax figure. Home prices are going up around the country, and so are property taxes. And the fun thing about a property tax, of course, is that you can never pay it off. It's an expense that the government tax on, money that you owe them simply because they say so, money you owe them as a penalty for, committing the sin of buying property. And there's no end point. There's no such thing as a final payment. CBS News reported recently, quote, property taxes across the U.S. are rising faster than inflation, with the average homeowner last year paying $4,427, up 3.7% from 2024, according to a new analysis from real estate data firm ATTOM. By comparison, the Consumer Price Index, a basket of commonly purchased goods and services, rose 2.7% last year. Homeowners in some states have faced considerably larger property tax increases, including an 18% hike in Delaware and a nearly 12% jump in Maryland. So it seems like there's some sort of conspiracy to deliberately make owning a home as expensive as possible, well, you're not crazy for noticing. Now, back to the Journal report, quote, sales of previously owned homes have held around 4 million a year since 2023, the lowest level in decades, and down from a pre-pandemic norm of between 5 million and 5.5 million a year, according to the National Association of Realtors. That means fewer prospective buyers are accessing home ownership, and many of those who are buying homes are stretching their budgets to do so. Those new homeowners are vulnerable to falling behind on payments if their incomes drop or they face unexpected jumps in home ownership costs. A buyer with a $2,500 monthly budget and a 20% down payment can afford to buy a $517,500 home at a 3% mortgage rate, according to real estate brokerage Redfin. At today's rate, around 6.5%, that same buyer can only afford a $384,000 home. Even though rates have climbed, typical home values remain near record highs, according to Zillow, confusing many buyers who have been waiting for prices to fall. Now, the last part is important. Normally, when interest rates go up, you expect home values to go down, and you're paying more for interest over time, so you expect that your upfront costs will be lower. This is normally how things work, and it makes sense that it would work that way, but in practice, that's not happening anymore. In most markets, there's nothing to offset the high interest rates at all. The homes have higher list prices and higher costs over time. It's a lose-lose. One of the reasons that the conventional wisdom doesn't apply anymore is that nobody wants to sell their home. And why would they? In many cases, they locked in an extremely low interest rate during the pandemic. And as we've already discussed, they can expect a very large return on their investment in the coming decades. But even after several decades, they won't want to sell because their children will need to live somewhere, if they will even pass their house down to their children, which we'll get to in a second. If the median home is going for $1 million, then many more homes are theoretically going to remain in the family. But what if I told you this is an incomplete picture of what's going on? And in fact, there was plenty of affordable housing in America, as it turns out. So here's an experiment. Take a look at this $700,000 home in San Francisco, California, one of the most desirable and expensive housing markets in the country. And it underscores just how bad things are out there. It's a $1,200 million, then many more homes are theoretically going to remain in the family. But what if I told you this is an incomplete picture of what's going on? And in fact, there was plenty of affordable housing in America, as it turns out. So here's an experiment. Take a look at this $700,000 home in San Francisco, California, one of the most desirable and expensive housing markets in the country. And it underscores just how bad things are out there. It's a 1,200 square foot dump, as you can see. The listing calls it a diamond in the rough with immense potential, which is always a good sign, right? When you're spending $700,000 on a home, that's what you want, immense potential. And we've all come to accept this kind of price disparity because of the principle of supply and demand, so we don't think about it. But here's what you can get for the same price in Detroit, Michigan, which is a far less desirable or expensive housing market than San Francisco. This is the exact same price. So $700,000 in the Midwest gets you basically a castle. It's 5,300 square feet, 5 bedrooms, a wood-paneled library. It's centrally located, 15 minutes to downtown, 20 minutes to the airport. A home that would be at least $2 million or more in Nashville or New York or Los Angeles, or even in suburban Detroit. Now, $700,000 certainly isn't cheap, but that's not the point. The reality is that real estate markets are hyper-local, and there are pockets of affordability out there. So you could still buy nice, livable $250,000 homes in many rural areas or small cities like Toledo. So what's really going on with housing? This is the first big issue, is that everybody wants to live in the same places, which is driving prices in those places up astronomically. San Francisco and New York and Boston and Nashville are boom towns. Detroit, Fort Wayne, and Gary aren't. Though to be fair, this is starting to change, and the Midwest is posting its first net migration gains in decades, driven largely by relatively affordable, houses compared to the coast. One factor driving this is jobs. San Francisco is the tech capital of the world. They have a lot more jobs there. But that's still kicking the can down the road. I mean, you're not addressing the fundamental issue, which is that something caused cities like Detroit to become so undesirable in the first place. Something caused cities like Detroit to become undesirable investment opportunities for job creators. Yes, the auto industry took a major hit. That's the default explanation for what's happened here. But plenty of industries in San Francisco have died since the 1960s as well. San Francisco used to be a manufacturing powerhouse. There was a major shipbuilding presence in the city. They also refined a lot of chemicals. None of that applies anymore. It's moved across the bay. So in many historical respects, San Francisco and Detroit are more similar than they appear. But over the past half century, one city managed to attract job seekers and investment while the other basically died out. This brings us to the second reason housing is out of control, which is urban crime has made many cities unlivable, which has led millions of people to rule out what should be some of the prime real estate in the country. So this is not as simple, by the way, as some people will say, as saying, oh, well, you just have to move. There are houses that are affordable. You just have to move there. Well, the problem is that in many cases, you don't want to move there because you don't want to get stabbed and you don't want your children to get stabbed while you walk down the street. I mean, that's the issue. And if you look at the demographics, the distinction between the two cities is hard to miss. San Francisco is around 5% Black. Detroit is closer to 80%. And as you'd expect, based on the statistics, this is just the reality. Detroit has 3 times the violent crime rate of San Francisco.